gonna be okay. Believe me, I have a sixth sense about these things. I've got sight, I've got hearing, I've got taste, I've got smell.
You think you survived childhood watching innocent cartoon animals chase each other around? Think again. You've been psychologically manipulated by some of the most disturbed characters ever animated, and you thank them for it. Every Saturday morning, millions of kids sat hypnotized watching what they thought were harmless hijinks. But here's the twisted truth. Looney Tunes wasn't entertainment. It was a psychological experiment, a study in how much dysfunction, trauma, and straight-up predatory behavior you could package as comedy before someone noticed. I'm about to expose 5 theories so dark, so disturbing, that you'll question every laugh you ever had watching these cartoons. We're talking clinical sociopathy masked as mischief, childhood trauma disguised as cuteness, and predatory grooming tactics that somehow became romantic comedy. And when we get to that final theory about Porky Pig, you're going to realize his famous stutter isn't just a quirky speech pattern. It's a cry for help that's been hiding in plain sight for decades. We missed all the warning signs, so buckle up, because I'm about to ruin your childhood harder than Yosemite Sam ruins his own plans. These aren't just cartoons, folks. They're psychological horror stories, and we've all been the test subjects. That's not all, folks. It's just the beginning. 1. Bugs Bunny is a sociopathic manipulator. Let's start with everyone's favorite hero, Bugs Bunny. You think he's just a wisecracking rabbit with perfect timing? Wrong. Bugs displays every single characteristic of a clinical sociopath, and somehow we've been cheering for him our entire lives. Watch any Bugs Bunny cartoon with fresh eyes. Notice how he never just escapes from danger. He has to completely destroy his opponent psychologically. Elmer Fudd isn't just hunting rabbits, he's being systematically tortured by a master manipulator who enjoys every second of it. Bugs doesn't run away. He orchestrates elaborate schemes designed to humiliate and break down his victims. Here's the disturbing part. Bugs shows zero empathy, ever. When Elmer is crying, frustrated, or genuinely hurt, does Bugs feel bad? Nope. He doubles down, he escalates. Classic sociopathic behavior is the inability to feel genuine remorse, and Bugs has never once shown authentic concern for the pain he causes others. The psychological explanation is chilling. Sociopaths are charming, intelligent, and manipulative. They view other people as objects to be controlled rather than beings with feelings. Sound familiar? Bugs treats everyone in his world like pawns in his personal entertainment show. He's not defending himself. He's feeding off the suffering he creates. And here's what makes it worse. We laugh because we think it's justice. But watch for the pattern. Bugs always goes way beyond what's necessary for self-defense. But that's just scratching the surface. Wait until you see what Tweety's really hiding. 2. Tweety Bird represents childhood trauma victims. Sweet little Tweety Bird with his adorable lisp and tiny yellow feathers. Yeah, that's not innocence you're seeing. That's a textbook trauma response, and it's heartbreaking once you recognize the signs. Notice how Tweety never acts like a normal bird. He doesn't fly away to freedom, doesn't migrate, doesn't socialize with other birds. Instead, he's trapped in perpetual hypervigilance, constantly scanning for threats while using baby talk and childlike behavior. That's called regression, when trauma victims mentally retreat to an earlier developmental stage to cope with overwhelming stress. Watch the dynamic carefully. Sylvester represents every predator Tweety has ever encountered, always stalking, always hunting, always trying to violate his safe space. And where's Granny? She's the classic absent protector, physically present but never actually preventing the trauma from happening. She shows up after the damage is done, offers temporary comfort, then leaves Tweety vulnerable all over again. The most disturbing evidence? Tweety's speech pattern isn't just cute, it's a developmental freeze. Trauma victims, especially children, often get stuck at the age when their trauma began. That baby talk isn't a speech impediment, It's psychological scarring. He literally cannot mature past the point where he first learned the world wasn't safe. Here's the psychological reality. Tweety displays classic symptoms of complex childhood trauma. The hypervigilance, the regression, the inability to trust even his supposed protectors. We've been watching a child abuse survivor relive his trauma in an endless loop and calling it entertainment. Notice how Tweety never wins by growing stronger. He survives by staying small and helpless. That's not victory, that's learned helplessness. But if Tweety's story disturbed you, wait until we analyze the predator who somehow became a romantic lead. 3. Pepe Le Pew shows predatory grooming tactics. Buckle up, because this one's going to make you sick. Pepe Le Pew isn't a hopeless romantic. He's a walking instruction manual for predatory behavior, and somehow Hollywood convinced us it was charming for decades. Let's break down Pepe's romantic playbook, because it reads like a stalker's greatest hits. First, he targets victims who are clearly trying to escape. The female cat isn't playing hard to get. She's literally running for her life. But Pepe interprets her terror as flirtation. Sound familiar? That's called willful misinterpretation, and it's Predator Behavior 101. Notice how Pepe never accepts rejection, ever. When his victims say no, struggle, or show obvious distress, he escalates his pursuit. He traps them in enclosed spaces, physically restrains them, and continues his advances despite their clear resistance. We're watching sexual assault disguised as courtship, and the cartoon frames it as persistence paying off. The psychological manipulation is textbook grooming behavior. Pepe love bombs his victims with over-the-top declarations of devotion, then immediately violates their boundaries. He isolates them from escape routes, uses his physical strength to overpower them, and gaslights them into believing their resistance is just shyness. When they fight back, he treats it as proof of their passionate nature. Here's what makes it horrifying. The cartoon always ends with the implication that his victim will eventually give in. The message: if you ignore someone's consent long enough, they'll eventually submit. That's not romance, that's conditioning children to normalize predatory behavior. The most disturbing part? Pepe displays zero self-awareness about his victim's genuine terror. He genuinely believes he's irresistible, not threatening. That combination of delusion and persistence is exactly how real predators justify their behavior. They're not hurting anyone, they're just being romantic. Watch for the pattern in any Pepe cartoon: pursuit, entrapment, assault, and then the victim's exhausted submission being framed as romantic success. But even that pales compared to watching someone's mental health deteriorate in real time. 4. Daffy Duck's mental breakdown is playing out in real time. Forget everything you think you know about Daffy Duck being just a jealous rival. What you're actually witnessing is a live-action psychological breakdown spanning decades, and it gets progressively more disturbing with each cartoon. Early Daffy was confident, successful, and genuinely talented. But watch his evolution, or rather, his devolution. As Bugs Bunny's popularity overshadows him, Daffy doesn't just get competitive. He develops full-blown narcissistic personality disorder with psychotic features. His schemes become increasingly unhinged, his grip on reality loosens, and his behavior patterns scream untreated mental illness. Notice how Daffy's delusions of grandeur intensify over time. He's not just jealous of Bugs, he's created an entire alternate reality where he's the superior entertainer, the better duck, the rightful star. When reality contradicts his delusions, he doesn't adjust his expectations. Instead, he doubles down, creating more elaborate fantasies to protect his fractured ego. The psychological deterioration follows a textbook pattern. Daffy starts with a narcissistic rage when his superiority is questioned. Then comes paranoid thinking. Everyone's conspiring against him. Bugs is deliberately sabotaging him. The world doesn't recognize his genius. Finally, he reaches full psychotic episodes where he loses touch with reality entirely, talking to himself and acting out elaborate scenarios where he's the hero. Here's the most disturbing element. His behavior gets worse under stress. Real mental illness often follows this pattern. Symptoms escalate during difficult periods, and without treatment, the person spirals deeper into dysfunction. Daffy never gets help. Instead, he's encouraged to perform his breakdown for entertainment. Watch how other characters respond to his obvious mental health crisis. They don't show concern or try to help. They exploit his illness for laughs. Bugs actively triggers Daffy's episodes because he knows it'll get a reaction. We're watching psychological abuse disguised as comedy rivalry. The saddest part? Daffy's desperate attempts to prove his worth become increasingly self-destructive. That's not comedy. That's mental illness being weaponized for entertainment. But the most heartbreaking revelation is still coming. The real reason Porky Pig can't speak properly. Save the most devastating for last, because this theory about Porky Pig will haunt you forever. That famous stutter isn't a cute character quirk. It's evidence of severe psychological trauma, and everyone around him is making it worse. Watch Porky's speech patterns closely. His stutter isn't consistent. It gets dramatically worse when he's stressed, anxious, or being pressured to perform. That's not a genetic speech impediment. That's a trauma response. Stuttering that fluctuates with emotional state often indicates neurological damage from abuse or extreme psychological stress, especially in childhood. Notice Porky's desperate people-pleasing behavior. He's constantly trying to help others, apologizing for existing, and overcompensating for his perceived inadequacy. Classic trauma victims develop these patterns because they learned early that their value depends entirely on making others happy. Porky's entire personality is built around avoiding conflict and seeking approval. Here's the most disturbing evidence. Watch how other characters treat his speech disability. They interrupt him, finish his sentences, mock his attempts to communicate, and show visible impatience when he struggles. Daffy literally exploits Porky's speech problems for his own gain. Bugs treats him like a sidekick whose opinions don't matter. This isn't friendly teasing, it's systematic psychological abuse of someone with a disability. The psychological explanation is heartbreaking. Porky displays every sign of someone who was silenced, dismissed, or punished for speaking as a child. His stutter represents his internalized belief that his words don't matter, that he's not worth listening to, that he should hurry up and stop bothering people with his thoughts. Most telling of all, Porky never gets angry about his treatment. Healthy people eventually push back against abuse, but Porky just tries harder to please his abusers. That level of learned helplessness suggests years of conditioning that resistance is futile. The final gut punch in every cartoon, Porky's trying to say something important, but nobody cares enough to listen. His stutter isn't holding him back. Society's cruelty toward people with disabilities is. Which theory disturbed you the most? Are there other childhood characters you want me to psychologically dissect? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this rabbit hole goes way deeper than Bugs Bunny's burrow. If you're ready to have more of your childhood memories destroyed by uncomfortable truths, smash that subscribe button. I've got theories about Disney Nicktoons and Saturday morning cartoons that'll make Looney Tunes look wholesome.